Well, it's making all kinds of noise, so let's get right into it and climb underneath. Alright, so the problem that we're having is when I put it into gear, you get this angry growling noise that shouldn't be there. See, it's not there now, but put it in reverse, and there it is. Now this also sometimes happens when the load conditions change, or if you're starting up a hill, or if you put it in park and the car leans up against the park pawl, which is a part of the transmission. The problem could be a bad transmission mount, or it could be a bad motor mount. So we're going to investigate that right now. Now the important thing to remember is that a jack is a lifting device, not a holding device, which means that once you get the vehicle in the air, you have to support it not just with the jack, but with jack stands. That'll keep you from getting crushed. Now we can stick our head under here. Try to find where what we're looking for is. So this is one of the mounts down here. So it'll have two components. It'll be a metal frame, and there'll be a rubber isolator inside. So the first thing you want to look for is it still bolted up properly? That is, has it come loose? And this is bolted up properly. You can see here that it has not come loose at all. So the next thing you want to look at is the condition of the rubber component inside the isolator. And this one looks like it's in perfect condition. So we know that this is not our problem. So here's the other one on the other side of the car, and as we can see, again, it's fastened securely. The rubber component is still intact, although it looks a little dried because it's so old. It's still functioning, so that's probably not our problem either. So we turn our attention now to the top one, and we can see that although it is bolted in securely, the rubber component inside here appears to have become torn. Now that's going to compromise the ability of the mount to isolate the body of the vehicle from the sound and vibration of a running engine, which is the problem that we've been having. So I suspect that this is the component that needs to be replaced. Now the interesting situation with the 3.1 liter V6 in the Chevy Beretta and the Corsica models is that Chevrolet designed them, I should say General Motors designed them, so that the motor mount atypically goes through the primary drive belt or serpentine belt. So what that means is that there's about 10 bolts that we'll have to unfasten, and it's a complicated affair. It's a very large component. Consequently, replacing the entire mount would probably be cost prohibitive because it's going to be a very expensive part. However, they do manufacture just the rubber isolator that you can buy separately and install inside your existing metal body of your inside the metal body of your existing motor mount, which is probably what we'll end up doing. Well, we're going to have to find out if the part's available first, so I guess let's call Autobahn. Okay, so a couple of minutes of research has revealed that the part that I'm looking for, the rubber insert for the front passenger side motor mount, is indeed available from AutoZone at the cost of $48.99. That's a lot of money for a piece of rubber, but it's an important piece of rubber, so I think we might actually go pay it.
What price is too much for an old Beretta?
About $51. Okay, so we went to the parts store and we got the replacement component. As you can see, this is the rubber insert to the complicated motor mount. Now we just have to remove the motor mount from the vehicle and disassemble it, stick this in, and put the whole thing back together. Okay, since the motor mount's job is to locate the engine inside the frame of the vehicle, before we can start, we have to support the bottom of the engine so that we can relieve the tension on the mount and remove it without the engine falling out of the car. So we're going to do that with a block of wood and a hydraulic jack. A block of wood distributes the weight across a larger surface so that you don't end up puncturing the oil pan or any other crucial components. Like my head. I hear you laughing. As I mentioned before, the 3.1 has a fairly complicated setup. In order to remove this motor mount, you have to remove these two bolts here, these two bolts here, this nut, and two more bolts down here from beneath the wheel well. Of course, if you have access to air tools, you're better off than I am by a long shot. Oop. See the motor move then? The whole thing went. Now, if you're smart and not lazy like I am, you'll remove this tire to get access and make it easier. But I just happen to have long extensions, and I'm a lazy bastard. That's skill right there, buddy. Alright, with our mounting bolts removed, we can now pull a good portion of this complicated motor mount assembly out. There we go. You can see the torn rubber here. You can see that this is sitting in there imperfectly. It's just a mess. But such things happen after like 20 years. So now I have to figure out how to take this thing apart. Alright, so this overly complicated motor mount contains two rubber pieces inside. First thing that you need to do is remove the top part by prying back these little prongs so that you can slide it out from the back. Once you've got that out, you can easily see the rubber and hydraulic component that we're going to be replacing. So right now we got to figure out how to get this out of the metal frame. So how does this come out? Well, let's get a sledgehammer. I can't really get a good enough hit on it. Shit, see, I knew I'd do that. At the very least, I should put this in a vise somewhere, probably. What you're gonna do is you're gonna lock the component down in a vise. Take yourself a ball peen hammer and a small cold chisel and work on your ring until it looks like this. When it gets to about that ugly, you know that you're close to getting it out. There we go. All right. Just like that. Wasn't that easy? It's the easiest part of this whole job. Yeah, and then we'll put the new one in. Now we're going to take this 5mm hex key and turn out the screws here so that we can mount this part back into the metal frame, which we've saved $30 in reusing at the cost of many long minutes of frustration and minor injury. Feel free to leave that part out. Now, if you're thinking ahead like I'm not, you could treat the threads with thread locker and make sure that they never back out. Not that that's likely to be a problem, but you know. Oh, whatever. So now that that's in there, we're going to replace this piece. It should just, with much difficulty, slide right in. There you go. And then lock the tabs down, which I'll do right now. This is the proper way to misuse tools. Alright, replace the little rubber cover dealie that we took off before. We now have ourselves one nicely restored motor mount, which we can, with much trouble, reinstall in the car. It goes back in the same way that it came out. It's the opposite of how I'm putting it out. Not much to it. You may have to have someone help you move the engine into position while you're installing the mount. So with everything back in place, the last thing that we want to do is we want to make sure and give a final tighten to each of our bolts. Remember, we got to hit these two here, this nut here, and don't forget the two that are accessible under the wheel well. Okay, all that remains now is to test start the car and see how it sounds when we shift it into gear. Hopefully, we won't have that, that groaning and grinding noise anymore. Alright, success! Car is as quiet in gear as it is in neutral. And that's how you replace the motor mount passenger side on a 3.1 Beretta or Corsica. They're the same car.